All right, we are live and excited to jump into the next session, specifically about the fire burn forecast. So Dana, you're up.
Yeah, sorry everyone for the technical difficulties. So now we're going to talk about the fire burn forecast. And this was started probably in about 2017. We started realizing that we were having flash flooding issues on some of the big burn areas. I think the big instigator for this was Spring Creek 416 burn area. And so essentially we started forecasting for burn areas, which was getting a little cluttered in our regular flood forecasting due to, I guess, less intense thresholds causing flooding issues, particularly of the burn areas. So last year we created a standalone system called the Fire Burn Forecast System, and we monitor 11 burn areas. This first image here is Colorado fires over 10,000 acres. So this is from 1980 to 2020. And we're looking at fires that occurred in greater than 5,000 feet of elevation. So you can see this strong upward trend in the amount of large fires over our higher terrains. So this is a trend that we expect to continue, which is another reason and motivation behind the fire burn forecast. Next slide. So as I alluded to, you need these lower intensity duration events to cause debris flows, mud flows, excessive runoff over burn areas. And we've always heard the rule of thumb of, about 0.25 inches and an hour, 30 minutes will typically cause debris flow issues. So this was kind of came from that Cannon et al. Article in 2008, where they looked at years 1 through 5 for burn areas, and they found the most significant impacts occurred in years 1 through 3. The thresholds were around that 0.25 inches an hour, which is typically what we start at when there's a new burn area for our forecasting system. It has the same threat tier as the flood threat bulletin. So again, it's that none, low, moderate, high impact. By year 2, there's a little bit more recovery. So we usually use typically around 0.5 inches in an hour. And then by year 3, we add on to that. So we're using around 0.75 inches per hour, and we're keeping track of all of these thresholds and what's actually causing debris flows over each individual burn area as kind of a side project. And we update those throughout the season to make sure that we're putting out accurate threats. Typically by year 4, you've fully recovered to that inch per hour threshold. However, there's really distinguished examples such as the Hayman burn area, which was in 2002. It burned 138,000 acres. And it still hasn't fully recovered, and there's still some issues on burn scars, that portion of the burn scars that were south-facing. So even though we kind of have these rules of thumb, it's really important to keep track of what's happening on each individual burn area. And there's really 4 things that contribute to this intensity duration recovery. The first is the soil infiltration. So typically after your first year, if you've had a severe burn, your soils become hydrophobic and they will just like go straight into runoff. You also have canopy interceptions. This has to do with the vegetation canopy, hydraulic roughness. And then this last one's very interesting. It's this median grain size. And that typically has to do with how much soil there is to wash away before you reach the bedrock. And across various burn areas, all of these play a different role. So it really varies burn to burn. And this is something that we're hoping to dive into a little bit deeper in our postseason research as we look at burn scar recovery. So it's not just rainfall driven, but it's a lot of these processes. And then again, you need this higher recurrence interval storm rather than like a 2-year storm, like a 10 to 25-year storm after 2 years of recovery to initiate debris flows. Next slide. So these are our 11 burn areas that we are issuing forecasts for daily. There is a little blurb at the top of our FTB forecast that let you know if we have issued any burn area forecasts, low threat or greater for that day. So you can also find that information there, and then it has its own standalone system. But all of these burn areas are very large in size. They are impactful areas, so areas where there's trails and camping and roads, high population areas. So the thresholds that we're using currently are on the left-hand side. Again, we tweak these, and we would love to know if anybody has any experience with these burn areas. This is still a point of where this product is going and evolving. So if you find any signs of debris flows, we would love those to be reported through our website, which Alyssa will talk about a little bit more later. So right now we have much lower intensities for these Cameron Peak, East Troublesome, Morgan Creek, Sylvan, and Williams Fork. One thing that really sticks out on this chart on the left-hand side is Cal Woods up to 0.75 inches per hour before we've really seen any issues with it. And a lot of this has to do with engineering feats. Same with Grizzly Creek. There's a lot of engineering as well as that grain size that we're thinking are at play here as to why we don't need that 0.25 inches an hour to trigger any debris flows at this moment. Again, if it goes over a more susceptible part of the burn area, lower thresholds can definitely cause some issues. Next slide. So this is just an example of how we use our probabilistic forecasting guidance for each of the burn areas, just to show that we look at both the potential for precipitation, potential of reaching those thresholds, how many hours it will rain, as well as that max 1 hour worst case scenario, or sometimes max 3 hour worst case scenario. And then I'm going to toss it back to Alyssa to talk about the sources that she used for debris flow observations.
Thanks. So due to the remote nature of these burn scars, verifying a debris flow or flood report on the scar can be difficult. These areas often have little access and reporting may be delayed for a number of reasons, but especially because, responders are prioritizing response versus actually reporting it. So this leads to some investigative work on our end on how to verify, was there a debris flow on and to answer two questions really. Was there a debris flow? And then two, was it actually on the burn scar? So here on the left, I have a list of some of the resources that we use to help determine one of those questions. Obviously, if it makes it to a local storm report, and into those storm report databases, that's the easiest way to verify. But more than often than not, they're actually not included in local storm reports. So that's when we really rely on CDOT, the Department of Transportation, which will share any travel impacts by flooding or debris flows. And they have several avenues that we look through, Facebook, Twitter, and then cotrip.org. In a similar vein, social media and the COWX hashtag are very helpful. Sometimes users will upload video or photos of flooding that we can use to confirm event. County sheriffs or emergency management pages are also helpful for things like this. So for example, we learned of the debris flow that closed Colorado 125 earlier this week through CDOT's Twitter. And then looking at the Grand County Sheriff's page, we were able to get some more information, including this picture, which confirmed that the slide was on the scar because you can see those burned trees in the background with the actual debris flow in the foreground. Couple other ways we've been able to verify, we've actually been able to use COCORA's reports from observers. They'll leave something like a remark that says they saw black or dark runoff or ash in the floodwater. So difficult to verify a lot of these events due to their rural nature, but these are some of the tools we use to do that. I'm going to switch back to Dana here. If I can advance the slide. There we go.
Yeah, so last year we started looking at some case studies for debris flows over the Grizzly Creek burn area. And one thing that I wanted to point out with this slide are these awesome observational networks. So those are the blue crosses that you see there that go up after burns. So for this particular case, they're all USGS gauges. I know that they have an equal mesonet over the East Troublesome burn area, but this is really, really key for identifying how much precip actually fell over the burn area as to what's actually triggering the debris flows. So next slide. This, to the best of our knowledge, thanks to USGS and Jamie Kostelnick that helped us out with this, are the debris flows that happened over Grizzly Creek last year. So we look at the estimated maximum rainfall using both gridded and observations, how long the event lasted, what the storm motion was, as well as what time it occurred and how many debris slides actually occurred, because this particular burn area shut down I-70 in multiple spots. So in red, we took a deeper dive. So here's an example of one of those from, next slide. From July 22nd. So what we have here is the gridded precipitation, which is the color. We have the observations next to the little crosses. So that's where the stations are located. And then in pink, those pink stars are where there was actually debris flow reports. So I think there's a lot to be learned from combining both these like QPE stats, because we have 15, 30-minute, and 60 minutes estimated rainfall intensity, as well as looking at the isohydal or rainfall patterns, and then taking into account storm motion. And unfortunately, storm motion was 0 this day, which is why there's no arrow indicating which way the storms were moving. But you can see, interestingly, that there's a debris flow at the entrance of the canyon from the Vale side, but not a lot of intense rainfall, where the center and the upper portions of the burn area got a lot of rainfall, and then corresponding downstream in these small tributaries were these debris flows. So this is something that we are also expanding into. So if there's any emergency managers on the line that have any interest of us doing this, maybe, for example, from the East Troublesome that happened last week in Grand County, we love to do these sorts of analyses to combine it all and understand how it's all working together. Again, this is a new area that the program's expanding, so we're trying to be also just less pure meteorology and starting to get more into hydrology effects, as well as debris flow effects. So I'm going to toss it back to Alyssa, who's going to talk about the SPM and then some upgrades that will benefit this FBF project in the off season.